Hello there, and welcome to Preprints in Motion, a podcast taking a deep dive into the fast-paced world of preprints.
Join us as we sit down with early career researchers, discuss their latest preprint, and find out about their journey through the muddy marshes of academia.
Hit that subscribe button, leave a rating, and find us on Twitter at MotionPod. Support us by heading over to buymeacoffee.com/preprints. But for now, let's get into the show.
This week we chat with Alex Freeman, creator of a really cool new way of sharing scientific findings called Octopus. Why Octopus? Well, strap in because we're about to dive in. We're talking about Octopus today, which is a really cool looking new platform. And I think we should just dive straight in with maybe an explanation of what Octopus is.
So Octopus it's a very different kind of publishing platform. So it's not designed to publish papers. It's designed to really sit alongside journals and carry out one of the many roles that journals currently carry out. So I think that journals are doing two different communication roles. Well, at least two, but I think they're doing at least two communication roles. One of which is concentrating on disseminating findings out to people who might use them. And that's really important. Obviously, doctors, engineers, politicians, the public all need to know about what is being found by researchers. And that means that kind of publication is ideally short and easy to read and starts with the findings and unpacks the methods only to the extent that you need to understand the methods to understand the robustness of the findings. You don't need the full details, you don't need the full analysis, you don't need the full data. And that's the way that a lot of papers have gone, and that journals encourage authors to write papers. But at the same time, journals are trying to kind of be the scientific record or the research record for where, everything is recorded for posterity to say who did what when, and in such a way that it can be replicated or really interrogated and built on by other people in the future. And that kind of communication really requires a very different way of writing. That is your full methods, your full data sets, and it kind of competes with the kind of dissemination writing. So one is, pushing for shorter and sweeter and readable, and the other is really pushing for the opposite. It's, long and full and really not a good read that you're going to sit down of an evening and look through somebody's data set. So what I'm proposing Octopus does is to take on that role of being the research record, sort of worthy and dull to read, but really, really important, because that is where, we get all our full data, we get our full analyses, we get full hypotheses and theory and all the thinking that goes on, which doesn't always make it into papers. And especially, negative results. We all know that those are difficult to get published in papers. All of these things, small data sets, everything that is not currently being recorded well is recorded in Octopus. And because Octopus carries everything in full detail, that also means it presents a better record for those who want to then assess the quality of research. So if you are trying to look at researcher for promotion or hiring or funding or any of these things, then what you want to see is not the beautifully polished stories that they tell to the public and whoever is reading journals. What you want to see is all their thoughts, all their ideas, all the hard work, all the sweat and the labor and everything that they've done. So what you want to be assessing is the true intrinsic quality of their work, not the findings that arose from it. Because you can be doing brilliant work that is maybe in a rare disease. It doesn't have massive amounts of impact somewhere, but it's really, really important, and you're doing it brilliantly. You could be a statistician or an analyst who is only working on a particular part of the research process, And so the findings might be under somebody else's first authorship or last authorship or whatever's important in your field, but actually you're doing your bit of the work brilliantly. So Octopus is designed to tackle kind of all of these problems at once, of full recording of what's going on, who's doing what, judging intrinsic quality, all of these really important things that I think are actually being sidelined by the drive to make journals the only place that people are sharing their work and recording their work and having their work assessed. So that's not a very short summary of what Octopus is, but I guess the short summary is Octopus is resetting the incentive structure for scientific or research sharing in such a way to really put the emphasis on being able to assess the quality of what people are doing and not just the quality of the stories that they're able to tell and the findings and the impact that derives from that work.
And you've named it brilliantly because, of course, you've taken this really big, complex thing that you're trying to do and you've broken it down into 8 simple little bite-sized pieces. So could you give us a little walkthrough why you called it Octopus and what those 8 pieces are?
Yeah, the 8 bit is slightly serendipitous. I didn't start with 8 and think, what's a name for this 8-legged monster? I wanted to think of a word that was sort of friendly and approachable and lent itself to a logo. And I also am a biologist by training, and I think octopuses are just one of the coolest things in the world. So, and also their 8 limbs have a kind of independence from the central brain. So it's that feeling of 8 independent and important, equally important things. So lots of reasons why I chose the name Octopus, but the 8 independent units are the kind of publications that you can record in Octopus. So that is a well-defined research problem, or a hypothesis or theoretical rationale, or a method or protocol, results and data, analysis, interpretation, real-world implementation, and a peer review. So those are the 8 publication types that Octopus takes. And what's important about those 8 types is that they have to be linked to each other. So you can't publish data without somebody having published the method that you collected that data according to. And so on and so on, so that you don't just sort of fling publications into this big soup of stuff. It all flows in branching chains from research questions or research problems.
That was really well done. For anyone listening, you didn't actually look for notes there. You just listed those off the top of your head. And that I thought we'd have caught you out there with that question and you'd have forgotten one of them, because exactly the thing I would have done.
So did I. I was. Well, as soon as you said it, I thought, I'm going to forget one of these.
Yeah, we usually have people flipping through their papers as we talk about them, as we ask different questions.
No papers.
So how did you settle on those 8 outputs? Why? I mean, there's an argument for maybe taking some out or adding some in. So why did you settle on those 8?
That is a good question. I mean, the whole concept of Octopus sort of came to me in one evening. So although the whole idea had been mulling in my head for a few weeks, I just sat down and wrote it all down within about 2 hours. And those are the 8 that I wrote down. And I don't know whether my brain had worked on them thoroughly over the previous weeks or possibly 20 years, but it seemed to me that that is how the research process does kind of break down. And it's interesting, actually, that now I'm actually publishing Octopus publications. It's not as simple as I'd thought how things break up. So results, for example, when I'm publishing a results publication, your instinctive feeling as a researcher is that that's everything that would go into a results section of a paper. But actually, the results publication in Octopus doesn't include any analysis. So it's purely descriptive. It's just the data and descriptives of the data. So you might have means or whatever. You might have graphs of the data. If it's qualitative data, then you describe the participants and you describe, how much data, what sort of data it is, but you don't do any analysis of it. And that, I think, it's a really interesting distinction between the two, because I think the merging of purely presentation of results and people's starting to analyze it already, I think that merging of the two into a results section in a publication does actually lead to a lack of clarity and division between the two, which is important to people. So going back to your original question, I don't quite know how I came up with the 8, but I think they do stand, even though there are huge differences between fields and domains within research. There are huge differences within, qualitative, quantitative work, exploratory work, confirmatory work. Generally, I think we do all go through this same kind of questioning process. And if you're doing a purely theoretical piece of work, then all your work may land within the research problem and the theoretical rationale publications of Octopus. If you're doing very real world work, then your work may fall within different areas of the publication sort of spectrum within Octopus. But I think those 8 publications can capture everything that we do as researchers.
How does this work in terms of updating things? Is this something you can kind of a cross between journal and notebook where you update as you go, or is this where you share things as they're finalised and ready, just in separate
Yeah, that's a really important point, because there are systems which are very much designed to publish as you go, so more like sharing your notebooks. And Octopus is not that. It's designed to be the version of record. It's almost like a patent office for research. So when you have your work, whatever piece of work that is, in its final form and you're ready to share it with the world, that's when you record it into Octopus and you get your kind of timestamp for that. You can update stuff in terms of reversioning. So you'll be able to reversion publications, but that's designed to allow people to either correct a mistake that they've made, or if a peer reviewer has picked up something really important, then you might want to reversion that publication for posterity and probably then include that peer reviewer as a co-author on the new publication, new version. But reversioning is a kind of quite a serious commitment. You lose all your previous links that people might have made to you. You get a new DOI. It's a different kind of publication. It's there, both versions are there for the record, but it's not designed for people to be keeping updating things.
How does the peer review part work? Is this something where the reviewer looks at the whole thing, or can reviewers peer review individual parts of this so they can just comment on a hypothesis, for example?
Yes, so you're already thinking still as a paper that's been cut up, which Octopus absolutely isn't. So a complete publication is a small thing within Octopus. Well, I say small, I mean, obviously it could be a massive data set, but it's a results publication, a data set, a hypothesis. These are publications in their own right. And so, yes, a peer review is a peer review of that publication. And it is absolutely not for looking along a whole chain, because what we really want to do is to really think about the intrinsic quality of each piece of work. A hypothesis can be a really, really valid and brilliant idea, even if later down the line, it turns out that that isn't how reality is. Doesn't invalidate the work that went into that brilliant hypothesis. And we really want to encourage people to be coming up with new hypotheses, new ideas, new theories, and not worrying about what happens later down the line. We need to share all of that thinking. It's very important to break the links, as it were, break the kind of the fascination that we have of everything relying on the findings that come out of it. I want findings to be a more emergent property that come out of us all as researchers collaborating together and all concentrating on the quality of our piece of work and putting it in the right place within this kind of grand structure that all of us are building around the world, this structure of knowledge. And findings will then emerge from this solid pieces of work, rather than each of us trying to build kind of towers up to findings with a potentially dodgy brick or two in the middle because we're not that good at some parts of the process.
I think that's one of the things I like the most about these platforms we're seeing starting to emerge like this, where it's kind of broken it down, which is that it becomes much more collaborative, and it's just such a better system than what we currently have, which is to not collaborate a lot of the time. It's more competitive than collaborative.
So yes, one of the things that I really think's important is that we as a research community think of our roles differently. And one of those is thinking more collaboratively, but I don't mean collaborative in the way that people usually use the term. I think of it as a much broader thing. So all around the world, and in fact through time, our work all relates to each other. So I could publish an idea today, which maybe it'll take 20 years before anybody is able to build on that idea and test it and come up with a method of testing it. Or maybe I'll publish a data set today, which somebody who I've never met in a completely different country, in a completely different field, has a brilliant way of analyzing it. So it's a collaboration with people that you've never met, who might be working in very different fields. They might be working far into the future. And I think that's a really exciting concept. I mean, I love the thought of being able to publish something that then somebody else will build on in a way that I hadn't conceived of. And I think we're missing out on so much potential talent by missing that. The other way that I think it should change the way we think about our role is in terms of specialization, because at the moment, we tend to think of the unit of publication as this paper, which requires a person or small group of people, or even quite a large group of people, but people who basically know each other and work together, to take research right from conceptualization of the problem right the way through to, the potential impact on whatever field you might be impacting. Whilst, realistically, each of us has strengths and weaknesses in our experience and in our skills. And it would be much better for the community as a whole and for us as individual researchers if we could concentrate on the things that we enjoy and are really good at, and let other people concentrate on the parts that they enjoy and are really good at. And we all kind of do our piece, and our pieces are fitted together within a system such as Octopus to build knowledge together. So I think it allows specialization, and it recognizes the importance of specialization, and that in itself makes the research that comes out of the community much more robust, because people aren't doing the things that they're not particularly good at.
Yeah, and that's the amazing thing of just breaking it down into, instead of it being one big final story, you've got these elements that all add up into a big story, which is how science works anyway. And that's exactly the thing that we were talking about, what will be a couple of weeks ago. What you want is people who are experts in one thing to come and do that one thing.
Yeah.
Because they're the best at it.
I don't want my airline pilot to have built the plane. Everybody should specialise.
So you started this back in 2018?
Yeah, 2017.
2017.
Yeah.
So it's been a fairly long process, because you launched this year. How did you find that process? Because obviously you've got to kind of build up quite a lot of support for something like this, because an idea that a lot of the scientific community don't necessarily understand the value in immediately, because I think a lot of people are blindsided by paper. It's got to be a paper. So how did you go about that and build up that early support?
I mean, I'm kind of frustrated at myself that it took so long to get to launch, but there was a pandemic in the middle, which didn't help. I started sort of slightly nervously asking people what they thought of this idea, and sort of sidling up to people at conferences and saying, I've had this idea. What do you think? Am I an idiot? Or is this being done somewhere? Or where's the fatal flaw in this? And initially, people didn't come up with a fatal flaw, but I learned a lot about people saying, have you heard of this? And have you heard of that? And realizing how big the world is of open science and people having ideas. And then there was a kind of turning point where the Royal Society had a conference on research culture, and they invited people to pitch ideas to change the research culture. And I got selected as one of the people to go up on stage and pitch at the Royal Society in London. It was a faintly terrifying experience, of course, but the audience were allowed to respond and vote. And I just suddenly, how these little votes go up on the screen and you can see votes coming in. And there was that moment where there was such this overwhelming vote for Octopus and this sort of mandate for Octopus. And I just thought, oh, wow, people do think this is a good idea. That was really, for me, the moment where I thought, okay, enough people think that this is a good idea. I've really got to go for this. And I thought, well, if Octopus can work, I think this is the most important thing that I could do with my life, because I think it could have such huge implications for increasing the integrity and the solidity of research. And society relies on this. So I went around trying to find places to help, and lots of brilliant people helped put together a prototype. And then I had a conversation with David Sweeney at Research England, who said, I think this could work and I want to back it. So they gave me the funding and they helped broker the partnership with JISC, who are helping build it. Also, the UK Reproducibility Network came on board. So altogether, got enough momentum, and now we've managed to turn the prototype, or start again, so that instead of a prototype, we have a production version, which, as you say, launched last month.
I want to pick up on the meta-science thing you were talking about, because I got into meta-science during the pandemic. I switched my research to do some COVID work, and it was very much looking at like quality of research, how we share research. And that has actually, in my very short time in academia, been probably the most impactful and the thing that I felt the most important thing that I've done, because I think we do science and we don't actually spend a whole bunch of time thinking about how we do science or why we do it. We think about experimental design, but that's kind of where it ends. And I think science would be a better place if we all just put a little bit more thought into the whole process. Because it is, as you said, it's so incredibly important how we do it, how we share things.
Yeah. I mean, I think so many of us who start out in science start out choosing science because we think it's important, and we have that inherent interest in generating knowledge, for the good of society. And yet we get then sucked into thinking about our careers, and everything comes about, the next step for us. That's a natural process, and it happens to all of us. But I think we have to break ourselves out of it. And we also have to design the research environment so that the incentives of career advancement, which are naturally going to come into people's lives because it's important to us as individuals, match the incentives for the greater good of society and for knowledge building. So I would say what I'm trying to do with Octopus, the fundamental thing I'm trying to do with it, is to strip back to what are the right incentives to produce the highest quality research findings and research integrity, and build a system for which that is the only important driving factor, and forgetting everything else, because Octopus has no commercial aspects to it. It's designed purely around incentivizing highest quality and best practice. And once you strip it back to that and really think about, what do we mean by good? What is good data? What is good analysis? What is it? And then how do we incentivize that? And then you start building a system around that concept. So that's what I tried to do. Obviously, if I've got anything wrong along the way, we might need to rethink.
But I think that's why it's so important that you've got the kind of backing you've got for this, because you've got the supporting of a lot of the UK funding bodies, and that makes a huge difference, because of course nobody's going to do something if it's not going to help them in their career, which is a sad reality, but it is a reality. And so I think that is such an important part, and why that's one of the things that sets what you're doing separate from a lot of the other initiatives that I've seen that are trying to think with maybe things where they're trying to break the publication process down. They don't have that kind of backing. It's somebody's good idea, but like you said, there's a lot of good ideas in open science. There's not a lot of strong, good implementation at the moment.
I think that's very true. And what I always say is that really more important than the money that we get from UKRI is the political clout. Because people need to trust a platform. They need to trust that it's going to be around for the long term. They need to trust that what they put in there will be noticed by the people that they need it to be noticed by. And so, really the job of implementation, as you say, is not about building a platform. That is relatively straightforward, although obviously easy for me to say because I'm not a software developer, but that is fundamentally pretty achievable. The bit that is difficult is the politics and the getting people to change the way they're doing things and trust you with their research findings and their research work.
Which is a nice segue into my next question, which is how are you going to get people to actually use the platform? And who do you think your early adopters would be?
Yeah, how am I going to do the difficult bit? Yeah. The first early adopter is myself, of course. So we have some publications now on Octopus from my research team. But actually we've had a really interesting cross-section of people who want to be early adopters. Some are interested in open science and open practice and want to try it out. Some I find really interesting because this is something that I had in the back of my mind. They're not academics, so they work within practitioner environments. So they might work in a government laboratory, or they might work within another institution that does research, but isn't an academic institution. And for them, writing a paper is just an infeasible sort of 3 or 4 months out of their day job. But they want to be sharing the work that they're doing because they know that they're doing important work that other people could be learning from and building on. And so for them, the idea of being able to get their data out there, get their methods out there, get their findings out there is all without writing an enormous paper, which they have no incentive to do, is really attractive. So I think that's a really interesting and important group of people. And surprisingly, I've had people from domains that I hadn't even conceived of being part of Octopus. So people working in arts, for instance, who find that the current way that they are encouraged to share their research through journals or monographs doesn't suit the kind of work that they do. It takes too long. They want to be getting stuff out there, and they want it to be fitting more in cyclical way of working so that they can work with participants and artists and publish the outcomes of that work, and then other people can build on it. And so it's a kind of cyclical process, which I had no idea that this was how arts researchers work, but it is. And for them, they need a platform that can allow this faster sharing. And so they're interested in Octopus for that reason. So I think it's a very interesting cross-section of people who are curious and hopefully going to be using Octopus in these first early months.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. That's my blinkers of life science, I guess.
So one of the things I'm going to be doing to try and help with uptake is after the summer break, so come September, I'm going to be running webinars and a kind of roadshow around institutions around the UK and across the world, where we take people in a very practical sense through publishing on Octopus. And because every publication in Octopus has to be linked to another publication, what we needed in Octopus was a load of seed publications so that people can be linking to them. So what we did is we developed algorithms to automatically take research problems from the existing literature, and we seeded the database with these. And we're very aware that these are algorithmically generated sort of single sentence publications that are just a research question. And they're the best that we can do with AI. And what we want people to do is to find the problem in the database that is closest to what they currently work on, and to rewrite that problem properly, which allows them to get a publication. It allows us to get some good, proper problem publications for other people to then attach their work to. So it's a kind of win-win situation, and I think it's a good way to introduce people to the platform and also to give people something really practical to do, because these kind of talks and webinars can be a lot of just me talking at people, whilst it's a lot more interesting if you say, find something that you want to publish and let's together work through thinking what a publication looks like in Octopus, because as I said, it's quite a different way of thinking, and then working through that publication process means that we can learn from our side if there are problems that people are having with the publication process. And on the researcher side, as I said, they get a publication out of it at the end.
How adaptable is the system to changing it as you go along, if you needed to?
Oh, we're totally changing it all the time. I mean, I've been publishing this week, going through the process myself, changed it loads already. So we want to make it as simple and easy and intuitive for people to publish as possible. And of course, when you design it yourself, you think like you think, and other people come along and they don't think like you think. And so we're adapting it all the time.
How are you going to collate all of that kind of feedback?
Yeah, there's a little feedback pop up on Octopus already that you can put in feedback. It comes straight to us and we'll deal with it. And you can also, we've got a little user community that you can join, and then you can chat to us and to other users about any issues that you're coming up with or improvements that you're coming up with.
A question very much related to preprinting, something I see people say, sort of ask a lot. How do you plan to deal with bad scientists or people who are putting up falsified research? Is this something you plan to alleviate with peer review, or are there other mechanisms in place?
There are two mechanisms. Well, there are three mechanisms for that. So, as I said, within Octopus, quality is the absolute important thing that we're aiming for. And so there are three different ways that we've built in for people to help drive high quality. One is peer review. So that's obviously, a full qualitative assessment of the quality of a piece of work. There are two others. One is a red flagging system, which means that if you spot something which has plagiarism or copyright issues or ethical issues, something like that, you can immediately raise a red flag against it, which alerts readers with a red banner, and then they can read what you've written to the authors, raising your concerns. And the authors can respond to that in a totally open public forum. There's a sort of a comment and response mechanism purely around red flags. And if that isn't resolved, hopefully in the majority of cases, authors will go, oops, sorry, forgot to acknowledge a copyright issue, or actually forgot to tell you we did get ethical permission for that. Sorry, I've put it in now. And they can reversion the publication. If it doesn't get resolved, then it can be escalated to a research integrity office who can hopefully deal with the issue. But I think it's really important that people can flag straight away and that readers can see that there's an issue and they can read what the issue is and then make up their own mind. Okay, it's a copyright issue. That's not going to affect my judgment on the work in here, but I'm aware that there's a copyright issue or whatever. So that's red flagging. And then the third quality sort of assurance aspect is a rating system, which always initially worries people because they think that quality shouldn't be a quantitative metric. But I mean, quantitative metrics are very useful and very important, but also I think what's important about the rating system is that there are predefined criteria for each of the publication types. And as I was saying before, it's about thinking, what does good look like for this publication type? So it's not the same as trying to rate a paper, which is a very big and complex moving parts piece of work. If you're rating a data set, for instance, your criteria might be something like, how reusable is this data? How closely to the protocol was it collected? Were there a lot of deviations from the protocol recorded? And possibly the third one might be the importance or rarity of this data. Is it a huge data set, or is it from a really rare source that's very difficult to get hold of, so very important to the field? So these sorts of metrics, I think, can have useful quantitative ratings on them. And anyone who's logged into the system can rate publications, and that is shown on the pages, obviously, of the publication, but also of the rater. So you can see who is rating whom. So we can keep an eye on the potential for, getting your mates to rate your publications. You can see circular publication ratings things going on. So we can, just through sheer transparency, hopefully we can keep an eye on research integrity.
Yeah, I think transparency helps a lot. It also makes people nicer.
I hope so. Nice. I hope so. And everything you do on Octopus is linked to your ORCID, so your kind of professional identity. And it's displayed on your author page. In Octopus, every author has their own page, which shows information pulled from their ORCID, so all their papers and their education and their affiliations, and also all their Octopus works. So their Octopus publications, their ratings, any links that they've made between publications, because we're trying to encourage people to make interdisciplinary links, that kind of thing. So everything you do is recorded against your name, for better or worse. If you are behaving badly, that will be obvious to people. And if you are doing great work and being really collaborative and helpful, then that will also shine through.
Does that go back to ORCID as well? Like showing, like how if you do peer review, that kind of shows up?
It doesn't go back to ORCID at the moment, but we can talk to them about things going in both directions, yeah.
For me, the biggest hurdle that I see is always that end point, once you've figured out all the little hurdles, of getting academics to accept it in things like hiring decisions.
Oh, that's a little hurdle, isn't it?
Yeah. If you've got a perfect system, if academics don't accept it when they hire somebody for a fellowship or for a lectureship, nobody's going to use it ever, because that's their career. I mean, we spoke with some amazing people on here who absolutely buck the trend of publishing papers. They just don't do it. But every single one of those are also leaving academia, so they don't need to do it.
Yeah.
They don't need to play the game. So how are you combating that?
So the important thing I think there is thinking about what will make Octopus useful for the institutions that want to do the hiring and the promotions. And so what they're desperate for is a way of assessing the quality of a researcher's work. And that's what Octopus is all about. So it actually provides them with a one-stop place where they can see everything that a researcher's done, also see all the open peer reviews of their work, and all the ratings and all the, the red flags, everything that research has done. So they've got both quantitative and qualitative quality metrics all in one go. And we're making Octopus, it's open source, and we're making it as integrated as possible with all the university systems. So if we make it really easy and really useful for funders and institutions, then hopefully they will want to use it because it's useful and easy for them. And as I say, it is trying to get at that intrinsic quality, which is what, funders and institutions are also trying to get at. So we're all working to the same ends. And hopefully, if we make it easy for people and useful for people and integrate it into their systems, then it'll get used.
We are all working to the same ends, although it doesn't necessarily always feel like that. Have you had any journal pushback? Because publishers are pretty on it when they don't like something or when something challenges their dominance in the ecosystem. I mean, Elsevier are busy buying up everything. Anything open science, Elsevier seem to be buying at the moment because that's where things are going. So, that's the only way they can stay in the position they're in.
So actually, no. What I've had is from some of the, the top journals is a real interest in working with Octopus because they can see how it works for them. And the reason I think it works for them, what I tell them I think it works for them, is because they really, the dissemination aspect is what journals are often moving towards and are really good at. And they have to encourage then authors to put data in repositories, and they have to encourage more and more supplementary information. And that is a bit of a messy and a bitty thing. You get supplementary PDFs, which aren't great, and you get data in all sorts of different places. What would work really well is for Octopus to kind of be the supplementary information for a journal article. And Octopus also, the publications can be by different people, which really interestingly opens up what a journal article is. It could be more like a narrative review of a whole group of authors' work from around the world, all on the same research question. And then it can easily link to all the in-depth methods, data analysis in Octopus, nice and neatly. And even better, if Octopus is all free, which it is, to read, and is considered the version of record, then the publisher's article can stay behind a paywall if that's important to them. So they are then, by having articles which are referring to primary research in Octopus, then they are kind of no longer held to this mandate of open access. They can be supporting open science through dissemination of work that is openly available in Octopus. So I think it is a really different way of thinking, but I think the forward-thinking journals are seeing how this is good for the whole of the scholarly system, in that everything that is important to researchers is openly and freely available. What they are doing is adding value through creating a narrative, easily read, nicely written resource that then disseminates those findings, which is a service that people would be happy to pay for.
So what does success look like for Octopus?
You know, obviously, in the long term, success for me would be Octopus has completely revolutionized the research culture. Researchers are happy. They're no longer being incentivized to do things that they don't want to do and that are bad for the community. So everybody is now concentrating on intrinsic quality, doing the best work they can, feeling that the world is more meritocratic and that if they do high quality work, they get promoted and recognized for it. And journals are disseminating this to the people that need to read it. And the whole of the primary research record is freely available and is linked into one place via Octopus. You know, obviously the code repositories and the data repositories are all doing the fabulous jobs that they are, but you know that you can go to Octopus and find all of those.
Which I think is a good ending point. I'm crap at ending this. I'm really
well,
bad
you know,
at ending this.
Ending with the future is brilliant and bright, and we're all going to be. It's all going to be marvelous. That's a good end point, isn't it?
Unless Emma has any extra questions to throw in there.
I don't have any extra questions. I just want to say it sounds really, really interesting in a really different way in which we do science currently, and one which sounds very positive.
Good.
And hopefully we'll because I mean, I don't know if many of the PIs currently how much they'd go for it, because I mean, even preprints, some don't really like that much. So I don't know how. I mean, I'd hope that they'd get on board, because sometimes I think all of the early career researchers would probably be like, yes, let's do this, because I've had loads of negative data that I've done well, but it makes it look like I've got 3 years worth of work. Well, I've got 3 years worth of work, but not a lot to show for that coming out of my PhD or postdoc. While this would mean I can be like, look, I've done this experiment really well.
Exactly.
Hi,
well, I mean, one of the things that I hope it does is to lower the barrier to publication. So you can publish that work. It shouldn't take you as long to write it up for Octopus as it would to write it up as a paper. So you can get it out there quite quickly with a low barrier. It's absolutely free. What's your PI got to complain about?
I think they just need to be more forward.
Get with the times.
Well, if you kind of do it and say, here we go, and now we've got a DOI and here's a publication out of this stuff that you thought wasn't going to get published anywhere, you know, that's I mean, true. I think that's a very easy start for people, is looking for their file drawer work that isn't going to get published any other way. And then the second thing I think is, if what I hope happens in some of the journals that I'm working with start talking in their, you know, their author guidelines, talking about linking stuff into Octopus, first of all, like supplementary information, then I think people will get to hear about it, get to know about it, and people will start seeing it as a different way of sharing their work. I mean, certainly we've got some work within my team where, you know, it's certainly not a straight linear narrative. There are a couple of different ways this could be analysed. Only one of them is going to be published in a paper, but reviewers are saying, oh, but you could analyse it this way. Well, in Octopus, you can say, here are two parallel analyses. And in the paper, you can say, there are 2 or 3 ways that this could be analysed. Go to these 2 publications to see the full analysis. And then the interpretation, you can say, well, actually, as it happens, all 3 came out with pretty much the same results, you know. So I think there are lots of ways in which people can see this as a beneficial way of working, hopefully.
Yeah, for sure, definitely.
Okay, and that is the show. If you enjoyed listening, then hit that subscribe button for more and leave us a review on whatever platform it is you're listening on. You can reach out to us on Twitter at MotionPod or online at preprintsandmotion.com. Didn't enjoy that? Well, we're all scientists here, so send us your review and let us know what works or what you'd like to hear more of, or less of. But until next time, have a good week.
Where do I find out about the different bioarchive licenses? This CC, BY, CDXY nonsense is driving me nuts.
Hey, that Bio have a resource for that?
Ugh, that's your answer to everything.
That's because they have everything you need to know about preprints.
Sure, they probably have the basics like info on the preprint servers, but what else is there?
There's so much more. Looking to post a preprint but not sure what different journal policies are? They have a collection to help you out with that. There are meetings around preprints and associated services. If you want to know how preprint adoption has changed over time, there's even a page on that.
And COVID?
They have a big section on preprints and the pandemic, plus some really cool infographics for communicating preprints.
And university policies? Surely they don't have that.
They collect uni policies where possible.
Okay, they do sound pretty impressive, but is it not a bit of an echo chamber?
It can be, but ASAP Bio also engage with people who don't love preprints and have concerns. So we had an excellent discussion on this very topic a couple of months ago.
Oh, is there anything ASAP Bio don't do?
Honestly, no, they're so nice over there. They were so quick to jump in and support this show. It's your one-stop shop for info on preprints and open science initiatives, so head over to asapbio.org to learn more and subscribe to their newsletter for the latest in preprint news. If you want a deeper dive into the world of preprints, then look out for the next recruitment of ASAP Bio Fellows.